Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Nibelink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about the biggest hot shots and have nots of the last couple of weeks. Let's get it. Now, unfortunately, I do not have my best friend Blake Creamer here with me tonight. We all have our pursuits and interests outside of fantasy hockey, and Blake had to take time this evening. He had to go set the world bench press record. It's 635 kilograms, or about 1,400 pounds. Shout out to Jimmy Cope. But Blake found out this was the record, knew he could beat it, so, he's just going to go off tonight, get that done, and we expect him and his tremendous pecs to be back on the pod later this week. So pretty hard to grudge him that, setting world records. We got to make space for that in our lives. Unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to talk about all our leagues and how things are going. Hope everything's gone well this week for all of our listeners. It was a good week for myself, won 3 out of 4. Winning in the places I need to win, I guess. So it's a good week for yours truly. Hopefully it was for everyone listening as well. With that said, let's get into some newsies here. Top of the list, Zucchini Man back with apples to spare. I think it was an assist in the first game and then 2 assists the next game. Man's absolutely cooking on arrival. You gotta love that for one of the Apples and Ginos favorites here. 23 minutes and 40 seconds he played in the game against Vegas here on Sunday as I'm recording. Worth noting here, so he immediately goes to line 1, power play 1. Marco Rossi maintains line 1, power play 1, and Boldy gets moved to the Johansson and Hartman second line. So worth noting the deployment changes there with Zuccarello back in the lineup. Good to see for Rossi. If you've been rostering him, you can continue to do so. Obviously, watching out for when Joel Eriksson-Ek will eventually return. Zuccarello had an interesting quote when asked about his injuries. He said, "I've been in front of the net twice. Once I got hit in my head. Was in the hospital for a long time." And yeah, I don't know if this was common knowledge. I had heard something about it, but I was refreshed after seeing this. He didn't get hit in the zucchini, but I guess in the sprouts, you might say. Yeah, he got hit in the nuts. He said, so that's why I stay on the perimeter and outside the crease, let the other guys do the dirty job. That's amazing. Great quote from Matt Zuccarello. Glad to see him back and producing immediately for his fantasy managers. Matt Barzal also activated from LTIR. He was active in the game today, Sunday, and didn't get anything done here today, but good to see him back in the lineup. Staying with the Isles, Bo Horvat missed Sunday, took that slash. I believe we mentioned Guggen and Blake mentioned in the waiver wire pod, but still missing. Most likely, I feel like he's going to be back in the next game for the Isles this week, but worth watching there. Similar story for Roman Yossi over in Nashville. Has been skating, has missed a couple games, probably in Tuesday when Nashville plays next, but also worth keeping an eye on to make sure that doesn't, kind of extend out there. Artemi Panarin missed the game here on Sunday with an upper body injury. No other info at the time that I'm recording this, so maybe you've got some better info by the time you're listening to this, but definitely worth watching. Artemi Panarin, obviously the straw that stirs the drink in New York, so if he's out, that is big news for everybody in New York. Big problems for Trocheck, for Lafreniere, for Adam Fox, Zibanejad on that power play, Kreider on that power play. Yeah, everybody who gets a lot of exposure to Artemi Panarin will be hurting as a result of him missing any more games if he has to. And lastly here, Philip Gustafsson was a surprise miss for the game. Was supposed to start this game after Marc-Andre Fleury went Saturday as the first part of the back-to-back that the Wild had here on the weekend. They called it a minor injury. He was getting checked out, held him out, missed the game. Jesper Wallstedt got the call-up and the start. Lost the start, but yeah, hopefully it's nothing too serious and Gustafsson can get right back into it. Doesn't sound like they're too worried, but obviously Gustafsson has been absolutely incredible. 224 goals against average, 922 save percentage on the season as a pretty consistent volume starter for the Minnesota Wild so far this year. And that's going to be all that we've got for some newsies. And we'll move right along and get into these hot shots. The hot shots. First off, I want to shout out a trio of duos. Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov. I guess you could throw Jake Gensel in there too as kind of the third member of that line. The other ones, McKinnon and Rantanen, and then obviously McDavid and Draisaitl. All guys we expected to be just tremendous fantasy producers, obviously, but it's really worth noting what they're doing. Braden Point leading this list, 4 goals, 11 points, 11 assists, 15 points in his last 5 games, averaging 3 points a game over the last 5. Nikita Kucherov only played in 4 of the last 5, but he's got 12 points in those 4, also averaging 3 points a game. And then Gensel, 7 goals in those 5 games, 9 points. Tremendous stuff from the Tampa Bay trio. What can you say, really? These guys are on a heater. Do I think that they sustain this level of heat for the whole season? No, but it's really good to see, obviously. Gensel on a 50 goal, 91 point pace. Kucherov 44 goal, 145 point pace. Braden Point on a 68 goal, 123 point pace so far this young season. Tremendous stuff for those Tampa Bay players. In Colorado, McKinnon, a casual 4 goals, 10 points in his last 5. Rantanen, 3 goals, 11 points in his last 5. Yeah, both on pace for, McKinnon's at 128 point pace, Rantanen 118 point pace. Tremendous stuff there. And then over in Edmonton, you got McDavid with 2 goals, 10 points in his last 5. You got Draisaitl, 5 goals and 13 points in his last 5 here. And shooting the puck even more than we're used to from Draisaitl. McDavid on a 125 point pace and Draisaitl right there with a 60 goal, 123 point pace. He's been absolutely lights out as of late. Worth shouting out these guys. I don't know that there's much to take away for fantasy, but when I pull up the sheet and I'm looking at who's been performing as of late, and these guys are just all across the top of the list, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the guys you'd expect to see. Worth shouting them out for the seasons that they're having and for this last stretch of games. Let's move along, though. Let's talk about some players that we might actually have to make decisions on throughout the season here. Dylan Guenther next up here. He's got 3 goals, 8 points in his last 5, just under 16 minutes average time on ice in those 5 games. Tremendous stuff for the relatively low amount of work he's been getting. 73rd in shots per 60, 52nd individual scoring chances for per 60, up at 18th in shot attempts per 60. In the on-ice stuff, not quite as good. 151st in Corsi 4 per 60 and 83rd in scoring chances 4 per 60. Still great numbers there. On a 35-goal, 79-point pace on the season now. And that's with just over 16 minutes average time on ice, about 16-15 average time on ice on the season. 69% IPP, nice. 17.3% shooting percentage, 16.1% on ice shooting percentage. That feels hot, but it also feels like at some point they're going to have to just realize that they have to find ways to play Dylan Guenther far more often than they have been so far. Yeah, it's clear this guy's a burgeoning star in the league. I think everyone sees it at this point. On the season, 9th in the league in individual scoring chances 4 per 60 is Dylan Guenther. I think that by and large, if you got Dylan Guenther, you have to be riding this thing to the moon. I do think that he's running hot on the luck metrics, but I'm also banking in a pretty clear opportunity for him to get more ice time as the season progresses. That's kind of part of the reason that not to toot my own horn here, a lot of other people are calling Dylan Guenther as big time sleeper this offseason. But a lot of the reason that A lot of people were into him. And one of the reasons that I specifically called out before the season was you got to think that even if it doesn't happen early in the season, Dylan Guenther could be one of these guys who really takes off the back half of the season, gains the trust of the coach, he gets a lot more ice time, and now all of a sudden, he's just firing on all cylinders with 18 plus minutes a night, and you've got like a point per game guy. And that's still within the wheelhouse. He's already almost at a point per game, probably running on some unsustainable metrics there, but if the average time on ice comes up, then Dylan Guenther can absolutely sustain a point per game pace all season long, and it wouldn't be that too crazy. So, love what I'm seeing from Dylan Guenther. I think that he's absolutely a hold. I don't think he's a sell high. Even with some unsustainable metrics, this is a guy I'd be hanging on to just because there's potential that he gets even more ice time and he goes absolutely nuclear with it. Next up, Brian Rust, 4 goals, 7 points in his last 5, 19 minutes average time on ice, 37 shots per 60, 17th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60 over the last 5 games here, 54th in Corsi, 4 per 60, and 60th in on-ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Love to see this from Brian Rust over the last little bit. Has missed a little bit of time early on here, but on pace, if you prorate it out to 82 games played, he'd be on pace for 39 goals, 66 points. Again, 19 minutes average time on ice on the season-long stuff here. 80% IPP is a bit hot, 16.9% shooting percentage maybe a bit hot, but 10% on ice shooting percentage maybe a bit low. I think the 66-point pace, probably not that far off what we could realistically expect to see from Brian Rust for the rest of the season. You got to love the deployment. Gotta love that the coach absolutely believes in him, absolutely trusts him in all situations. You gotta kind of love that they don't really have anybody else there in Pittsburgh, so you know that Brian Rust is going to get that deployment. He's kind of living right in this range where I thought he would. The metrics are a little bit different to where I thought they might be, but I had him for 35 goals and 70 points at the start of the season, and for him to be very close to that pace feels like he's just kind of rounding into form here. And obviously, the underlying metrics have been terrific as of late, and so hopefully you're listening to us on Brian Rust and you've got him scooped up in your leagues, and he's paying dividends for you now. Moving over to Buffalo, Jason Zucker, 3 goals, 5 points in his last 5 here. Just under 15 minutes average time on ice, 41st in shots per 60, 7th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. It's been an interesting run for Jason Zucker here. That being said, in this last game here against the Leafs, he was moved to the Greenway Kulich line, which was the line that got the least amount of ice time in the game here on Sunday. You don't love that. You don't love that he was bumped off the top power play. They've been doing weird stuff with the power play units, so it's hard to even say what the top power play is at the moment. I guess you just go with whatever unit Tage Thompson is on. He was not on that unit. So I think it's just a spot where, thank you for your service, Jason Zucker. He's probably moving on. You're probably moving on to the next one. That being said, it's definitely a player that I would not hesitate to stream back in if and when he's back on the Thompson line on the top power play. Definitely one of these guys who can have these stretches, and that's worth filing away in your back pocket so you can be aware of it and keep him on your radar for the next time Buffalo has a nice schedule. Heading over to Seattle, we've got Oliver Bjorkstrand here. 4 goals, 6 points in his last 5. Had a huge 2-goal, 2-assist night not too long ago here. That's boosting these numbers for sure. 16 plus minutes average time on ice. 203rd shots per 60, 216 individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. About the same in Corsi, 4 per 60, and on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. On pace now on the season for 29 goals, 58 points, about 15 and a half minutes average time on ice on the season. Doing better on the season in terms of the shot production and the Corsi 4 rank, but has not generated a lot of scoring chances individually or as a team when he's been on the ice on the season. 76% IPP, 16.4% shooting percentage, 11.3% on ice shooting percentage. Just feels like Bjorkstrand is one of these guys. He has the talent to get hot like this, but he seems to be wildly inconsistent. Definitely doesn't help that Dan Bylsma is ping-ponging these guys around the lineup, not using the same guys the most, I guess, in consecutive games a lot of the time. And so that's not helping matters either. Last game was on a line with Tolvanen and Shane Wright. Still on the de facto top power play. Basically, whatever power play Jared McCann is on is the one that I'm calling the top power play. He's on that unit, has been for most of the season at this point. So that part's good for Oliver Bjorkstrand. But again, it's probably a situation similar to Zucker where I'm not really thinking of him as more than an opportunistic streamer, a guy that absolutely can pop off when given, the right deployment and the right set of circumstances rather. I think that he is that guy, but I don't think without, 18 plus minutes a night that this is a guy that we can rely on to be consistent on our fantasy squads. And so for that reason, I think it's probably a scenario in which you're going to say, yet again, adios to our guy Oliver Bjorkstrand and just let him go this week. That being said, they have 4 games this week. If you've got open spots on the quote unquote heavy nights, it's not that heavy this week. So maybe you got spots. Maybe you hang on to Bjorkstrand for one more week. Hope that he can make something happen for one more week. They play Ottawa and Chicago on Tuesday, Thursday to start the week. That's not the scariest opponents of all time. So maybe there's something there and you want to at least check out the other options that you have to drop on your squad before moving on from Oliver Bjorkstrand. Moving over to the Islanders, we've got Noah Dobson here. Noah Dobson, 2 goals, 6 points in his last 5. So he's finally woken up here. It's great to see. Almost 23 minutes average time on ice. Third in shots per 60, ninth individual scoring chances 4/60, 57th Corsi 4/60, 45th on ice scoring chances 4/60. Those are good numbers, especially the individual ones from Noah Dobson. What we expected to see, he went through some stretches where he was getting the underlying metrics and not producing, and then went through a kind of a cold stretch where he was not getting the underlying metrics and still not producing. Now it seems like everything's coming together a little bit for him, and we love to see that for sure. Definitely is going to help once Horvat's back in the lineup. Anthony Duclair on the way. You got to think that helps this team get better overall. And hopefully we get a spot here where we can actually see what Noah Dobson is able to do with a true top power play unit and a bunch of ice time. I'm pretty hopeful. I would say that is going to come true here. Probably if you're looking for it, you may have missed your buy low window on Noah Dobson here, but might be still worth kicking tires if someone is thinking, hey, this is still the Isles, Noah Dobson, maybe I've got a sell window on him here because he's been hot the last little bit. I can get rid of him. Maybe there's somebody in your league still thinking that, and they will sell a Noah Dobson to you at something of a discount. If that's the case, I'd absolutely go out and get him. He had 8 shots and a goal in this game against Chicago here today, even threw 3 hits for good measure, blocked a shot. Great game from Noah Dobson today. So for fantasy purposes, Noah Dobson starting to turn things around. I'm pretty excited about what he can be. I still think that he was probably going too high in drafts. I didn't have him ranked that highly in drafts as to where he was going. He was just going a little bit too high for what I perceived as the risk for Noah Dobson. That has somewhat come true, at least to this point in the season. That being said, if someone is totally just all the way out now on Noah Dobson because of the low production to date, like it's a 10-goal, 46-point pace on the season for him. If somebody's all the way out now, I would definitely get back in on Noah Dobson at a much lower price if he's available in your league. Over to Utah, Mikhail Sergachev has a goal and 6 points in his last 5, averaging over 26 minutes a game. 118th shots per 60, 67th individual scoring chances 4/60. Nothing to write home about there. Sergachev has never been a massive shot producer, so that's pretty in line with his, career numbers and his season-long numbers there. 38th Corsi 4/60, 39th on ice scoring chances 4/60. Also pretty in line with his season-long numbers. Now pacing for 19 goals and 60 points on the season is Mikhail Sergachev. That's a 44% IPP. He's got a 14.3% individual shooting percentage. That's probably going to come down, almost certainly going to come down. 13.5% on ice shooting percentage, also almost certainly going to come down. I don't know that Sergachev is necessarily a 60-point guy on the Utah Hockey Club as it's currently constructed, but I can definitely see him getting it around a 55-point pace rest of season. Definitely worthwhile there. Worth checking in on the player. I had him projected for 9 goals and 55 points at the start of the season. I was with 24.5 minutes average time on ice. Looks like he's going to get more than that, especially with the Jersey injury. and other injuries they've sustained to the back end there in Utah. So, yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic on the 55. Maybe, if things break right, maybe he can sustain the 60 with the additional ice time. It's definitely possible for a guy of Sergachev's talents, but at least I feel pretty confident that he's going to be a very useful 55-point defenseman rest of season. All right, moving along. Got to talk about the Patreon. $2 a month gets you the supporter tier, access to patron-only live shows. We did a patron-only live show last week. I did a whole bunch of team reviews. Team reviews, I think, are super interesting way to help people see what they can apply to their own teams. It feels like it shouldn't be something that you can apply to your own team because I'm talking directly about a specific team that somebody else has. But I think there are always really interesting things that come out of these team reviews where I'm like evaluating not only just the team, but the league settings, the point scoring settings, the best roster construction for this type of league, and people can really take that away and apply it to their own leagues. And so if that interests you, you can still get the audio recording and the PDF document that I used as a visual aid. You can still get that if you get in on the supporter tier, $2 a month. You'll find that on the Patreon site. Apple's tier, $8 a month, gets you access to those patron-only live shows, also gets you access to the patron-only Discord channels, gets you the show notes, including the notes for this episode that I'm doing right now. Also gets you the show notes for the weekly waiver wire episode, and that's where you get all the ranks for the best players to pick up for the week, the teams to look at and to stream from throughout the week, best off-night schedules, all that stuff's in there. So that's a big perk there. And the Apples and Genos player evaluation tool is another big piece that you're going to want to get your hands on. It's how I'm pulling up all these last 5 game stats and season-long stats really quickly for you, talking about them on the pod. That's all in there in the player evaluation tool. You can compare 2 players side by side really quickly, help you make that add, drop, trade decision a lot easier. And for the true degenerates, we have the $15 a month Genos tier. Gets you all the previous perks mentioned. Wow, apparently that's a tongue twister for me today. Gets you all those perks, but also gets you every single question answered, guaranteed by yours truly. All right. That said, we got to move along. We got to get into the have-nots. And there are some have-nots here for sure. Stefan Nason topping the list here. That's a guy that, Blake's been talking about as a buy low. Has 0 points his last 5. I should double check and see if it goes back further than that. Does it go back further than that for Stefan Nason? Yeah, it's six games now that Stefan Nason has gone without a point. Now, this is a situation like he's still got close to 17-15 average time on ice over the last little bit. That's obviously good enough ice time to be relevant for fantasy hockey. Maybe not exceptional, but relevant for sure. Still on that top power play, getting lots of power play time there. Is playing now on the third line with Haula and Cotter. He has been experimented with up the lineup in the top 6 at times, but it seems like for now, at least, he's going to be on that third line, which is a solid third line, but definitely not like a scoring line per se. Now, all of that being said, Stefan Nason, 6th in shots per 60, 5th individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 10th Corsi 4 per 60, 2nd in on-ice scoring chances 4 per 60 over the last 5 games. Tremendous stuff, really, under the hood from Stefan Nason the last little bit. 32-goal, 55-point pace. 52% IPP, 18.3% shooting percentage. That's going to come down. 12.7% on ice shooting percentage. Honestly, for the amount of ice time that he's been getting and the power play deployment, that doesn't feel too crazy. So while the goals might come down a bit, I don't know if the 55-point pace is going to come down. So I'm kind of into that a little bit there. Feels like Nason has really found a home, and they're making things work on that Devils power play with him as a bit of a valuable piece there, which is not something I thought I'd be saying this far into the season. But definitely shout out to Stefan Nason for the role he's been able to carve out for himself there. And yeah, while I might not have a lot of excitement about some kind of massive ceiling, if I guess if he sustains the 17 plus minute treatment, then maybe he's in the 60, maybe 65 point range. That's kind of pushing the top end of what I think Stefan Nason can be rest of season if he sustains 17 plus minutes average time on ice. But yeah, 55 points I feel pretty good about, honestly, at this point in the season. Obviously, it still matters if he keeps power play one. They do have Timo Meyer there, so if Nason doesn't put the puck in the back of the net for much longer, perhaps they are looking at other options. Who knows? But um, worth worth mentioning that sometimes coaches, they are only looking at the actual goals for, right? And so if the goals for aren't there, a guy can get moved even if the underlying stats are looking terrific. And that's something that we do have to account for in fantasy because obviously we need that power play one deployment. So yeah, kind of an interesting confluence of factors there for Stefan Nason, where underlying stuff looks really good, has obviously been a little unlucky in the last little bit, was probably a little bit too lucky earlier on, and it's kind of evening out a bit here. But we also have to keep in mind that, you know, Sheldon Keefe may not be looking only at the shots per 60 number when deciding who to put on power play one. So keep that all in mind, but I'm not worried about Stefan Nason's performance. I'm only really worried about his deployment at the moment. Matthew Nyes next up. He has a goal and assist for 2 points now in his last five. Did before when I was working on this sheet before, he only had the 1 point in the last five, but obviously got another one. 19 plus minutes average time on ice, 277 shots per 60. Shots have fallen off in a big way here. 174th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60. 208 Corsi, 4 per 60. 124 scoring chances, 4 per 60. Nyes has carved out a little bit of a role for himself here. There's no doubt, but 53% IPP, 22% shooting percentage, 11.6% on ice shooting percentage. Kind of feel like the IPP on ice shooting percentage thing might stick around, so he might be a 51-point player. That could be true, but the 22% shooting percentage feels pretty unsustainable unless something changes here. So yeah, it might be more of like a 20-25 goal, 50-point player rest of season. This might be a point in which you might want to consider moving off of Matthew Nyes. Obviously, this is a player, he carries a bit more weight in, no pun intended, but carries a bit more weight in a Bangers Cats league where he throws the hits, does all that for you. Yeah, definitely something to consider with Matthew Nyes, though. I think he's taken a step this year, but I think there's probably another step before he can truly be considered a like must rest or all season long kind of player. Alex Tuck is the third player here. Just one goal actually scored today in his last 5 games. Yeah, it's been a bit of a weird run for Alex Tuck. I mean, it's been a weird run for Buffalo in general. In this game today, even, they jump out to a 2-0 lead and then get swallowed up. Toronto scores 3 goals, and I think it was like 2.5 minutes in the second period, and come out with a 5-3 win at the end of it all. Yeah, been a weird run for Buffalo. Feel like Alex Tuck should be a consistent force there. 18.5 minutes average time on ice on the season, closer to 20. They've been playing with lines. They've been playing with the power play units. So it's kind of all up in the air at the moment. But yeah, I think it's worth being a little concerned that Alex Tuck may have run his best stretch of hockey for the season already. On the season, he's pacing for 24 goals, 66 points. And yeah, there's ways that this gets better for sure, right? He can stick on the Thompson line. They can go back to a true top power play unit that Tuck is on. He hasn't been on a top power play unit for probably I'd say a majority of the season at this point, and so that's kind of been holding him back a little bit as well. Definitely a player I was excited about, but he also doesn't have great underlying numbers really at any point throughout the season, and they're putrid as of late. 244th shots per 60, 278 Corsi 4 per 60, 271 on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. Yeah, it's just not a good look for Alex Tuck at the moment. So have to consider that this may be a player who's given us his best stretch of hockey right before this, where pucks were just going in all the time for Alex Tuck, and now they're not. And the underlying metrics are not suggesting that Alex Tuck is providing, what we need him to for him to really be the player that I thought he could be at the start of the season. How much of that is Alex Tuck and how much of that is Buffalo really struggling to find an identity in this season is definitely up for debate. I'm not willing to, write off Alex Tuck, the player. I think we have a pretty good sample size on him at this point to say that he can be a really solid player. Uh, and so there are probably some better days ahead, but it feels like a player who could be a little bit inconsistent unless Buffalo can really figure things out and turn this thing around. I mean, it's also hard to fault Alex Tuck too much with, Rasmus Dahlin out of the lineup, the captain out of the lineup. That's a big piece to be missing on the back end, huge part of that team, no doubt. So that's been affecting the Sabres for the last little bit for sure. Yeah, it's a weird spot for Alex Tuck to be in, and I have Alex Tuck in a couple spots, and I'm honestly not sure what I should be doing with him. Should I be, hanging him out there for some trades? Should I be hanging on, expecting better things ahead? Because I do really like the player. I had a good projection on him at the start of the season. And so it's not a player that I am willing to give up on, kind of blindly. I had a 32 goal, 72 point projection on him and did expect him to skate close to 20 minutes a night. If that's not going to happen, if he's going to be more of this 18.5 minute player, not getting power play one all the time, then we do have to adjust our expectations for Alex Tuck rest of season. And that's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but it may be one we want to swallow sooner rather than later. Moving over to the Devils, Nico Hischier, just 1 goal in his last 5. Um, it's been quite a season for Hischier to this point. He's on a 40 goal, 70 point pace, so he's had the pucks going in all season long until lately. Now, it's the deployment's still there, almost 21 minutes a night over the last 5. 154th shots per 60, 54th individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 41st Corsi 4 per 60, 6th in on-ice scoring chances 4 per 60. Underlying metrics still looking hot for Nico Hischier. Only a 54% IPP, 12.2% on-ice shooting percentage. Those numbers don't scare me at all. Like, this is a player who could actually be pacing for higher points per game. 17.6% shooting percentage. Yeah, that's probably high for a guy like Nico Hischier. But all that said, I think Nico Hischier can shoot for a decent percentage, and I think he's actually been getting a little bit unlucky in terms of the IPP here so far. So I'm pretty into Nico Hischier. If there is, any small buy low window on Nico Hischier or buy at a slightly reduced price where someone is saying, oh shoot, Nico Hischier's going back to, what he was 2 years ago or something like that, or yeah, they just don't have the faith in Hischier, then I would be interested in acquiring him because I do think he's shown us something this year. I think he's shown, the trust of the coach, Sheldon Keefe, right away. Yeah, I'd be definitely very interested if Nico Hischier was coming available on any of your trade blocks. I think this is a guy who should be considered, 35 goal, 80 point player moving forward rest of season. And so if he's not being considered like that by someone in your league, then I think you should go out and attack that for sure. I had him for 31 goals, 78 points at the start of the season, but I do think that the Devils have been even better offensively than I've expected. And I think Nico Hischier should get some positive rebound in the next little bit here. Next up, a couple of guys, and we got to ask the question, are they just too old and things are catching up to them at this point? Patrick Kane, Evgeny Malkin are the two names here. And definitely two different situations, but definitely a lot of similarities as well. Both have 1 assist only in their last 5 games. Both are skating about 17.5 minutes average time on ice. Kane's got 157 shots per 60, 132 in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 171. Corsi, 4 per 60, 68th in on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Whereas Malkin, all the way down at 324th in shots per 60, 235th individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 128th in Corsi, 4 per 60, and 101 in on ice scoring chances, 4 per 60. Malkin's ice time has dropped here. That's a little bit concerning. They've been trying weird stuff with the power play units, trying, like 2 split power play units just to try to get anything going. So that's obviously not what you want to see if you're a Malkin manager. And then, Detroit has been doing some interesting things with their power play as well. Kane and DeBrincat on one unit, Larkin and Raymond on another. So they've been doing some, uh, yeah, overthinking, you might say, in terms of their power play. Uh, but Kane is also like, he's come back from this injury. He looked dangerous to me, the eye test for whatever it's worth in that game. Maybe overthinking it a bit at the moment. It happens to the best of us. It even happens to Patrick Kane at times when the pucks aren't going in. You grip the stick, you overthink the play a little bit. Yeah, it's definitely not been a good stretch for Patrick Kane, but I do think there's enough here that I'm willing to hold on to him in some leagues. The only place that I actually have Patrick Kane is the 16 team tier 1 couple, and there's just, it's like I'm picking up 5% rostered players versus Patrick Kane. Yeah, I'll probably just hang on to Patrick Kane and hope he can turn it around in that case. But Evgeny Malkin, obviously his own situation, the shots really not being there. Yeah, I don't want to put something out there that's just pure speculation, but you got to wonder if there's something under the hood that's bothering him, that's possibly affecting. He came out so hot, so on fire in the early going, and then to have slowed down to just a crawl the last little bit, it just feels very sudden. And so, yeah, hopefully everything's right for Evgeny Malkin. This is just a slow stretch and he gets back on track here. But also, Pittsburgh doesn't have, a plethora of wingers for him to play with. So he's been playing with Michael Bunting and Philip Tomasino. Like, I'll do respect to those players, but that's not exactly line one material. Crosby's been getting Raquel and Rust on his line, which are obviously the best two wingers to play with in Pittsburgh. So yeah, it's a tough spot to be for Evgeny Malkin, and it's hard to see like a massive ceiling for him, where suddenly this just gets absolutely right all of a sudden, and now he's back to old Evgeny Malkin at a point per game pace. I don't think that's in the wheelhouse anymore. 60, 65 point pace Evgeny Malkin, I do think he can get back there, but it's a little bit harder to see it coming now than it has been in the past, and I think that's worth something in your evaluation of the player moving forward. Moving over to some defensemen here. Mike Matheson, we've got to talk about here. Just one assist in his last 5 games, still skating a ridiculous amount of ice time, over 26 minutes in the last 5. Lane Hudson has taken over the top power play. It's been working pretty well, kind of coinciding with the arrival of Patrick Laine to the lineup. Obviously, he's injected a much needed scoring boost to the Canadiens in his first few games in the uniform. And so you've got to wonder if and when Matheson can get back on the top power play. If he doesn't get on the top power play for the rest of the season, then that's a big problem for his potential moving forward. I had him for 58 points base projection at the start of the season, but that was with 22 power play points. So if you remove, let's say you got to remove a big chunk of that in Montreal. They do run a top power play unit almost all the time. And so say you remove all but 5 of those power play points as a pace, that's 17 points off the top. Now all of a sudden you're talking about 41 point pace Mike Matheson, and how valuable is that to you moving forward? So that's definitely something you have to take into account when evaluating this player rest of season, is can you live with a 41 point pace Mike Matheson rest of season? He's going to go through stretches like this where it's just 1 assist in 5 games or something like that. And are you willing to rock with that for the rest of the season, in the hopes that A, he gets back on power play 1, but also B, that he will have good stretches as well where he maintains a serviceable point pace even if he's not on the top power play. So that's what you're getting with Mike Matheson at this point in time. And it's a tough line to walk at this point with him. I think that it's worth holding on for a little bit more. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been, but I think Hudson's only been on the top power play for 3 or 4 games at this point. So I think there's still a chance that, if it doesn't work for a couple more games, that they do go back to Matheson there. But it's pretty clear that they want Lane Hudson to be that guy long term. And so it wouldn't be surprising that even if Matheson does get back there in the next little bit, that Hudson eventually takes it over for good by the end of the season. And, that is a concern for a guy like Mike Matheson. Over to Florida, Aaron Ekblad, 0 points in his last 5 games. And that's with power play 1 deployment, so that's a little bit hard to stomach if you are an Aaron Ekblad rosterer. 23 minutes average time on ice, 16th in shots per 60, 22nd individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 5th Corsi 4 per 60, 21st on ice scoring chances 4 per 60. All the under the hood numbers looking really good for Aaron Ekblad, just not able to put the biscuit in the basket, as Blake would say. 36% IPP, 1.8% shooting percentage, 9.8% on ice shooting percentage on the season, coming to a 37-point pace. That's definitely something that should bump up for Aaron Ekblad, especially as long as he's able to maintain top power play usage. But the question is, can he maintain top power play usage if he's not producing? And that's definitely a big question for Aaron Ekblad and for the Panthers overall. All this being said, the Panthers have 4 games this week, all on off nights. It's literally not costing you anything to keep Ekblad in the lineup for this week. You can stream another defenseman and not have to worry about it conflicting with Aaron Ekblad's schedule this week. So I think that this is probably a week to hang on to Aaron Ekblad. Hopefully he rights the ship for you and gets some production and gets things headed in the right direction again this week. If not, after this week, let's have the conversation. If he gets replaced on the top power play throughout the week, let's have the conversation. But this is a week in which I'm hanging on to Aaron Ekblad just for the schedule alone and seeing how things shake out from here. The underlying metrics being really good is giving me some confidence. It's really just about whether he can maintain top power play usage. Next up, well, before we get to the under the hood segment here, if we didn't talk about a player that you want to hear about, make sure that you join Monday, 8 p.m. EST every week. I'm live streaming the Puzzling Players segment. I go to the Apples and Geos Discord server, ask for the most puzzling players, and everybody just kind of votes, and we take a list of whoever's the most voted on, and we talk about those players. And you can join live, you can comment on here on YouTube, and you can tell me who you want me to talk about, or you can ask your questions, trade questions, whatever you got. Come join 8 p.m. EST every single Monday, and you'll find me there. If we need to talk about a player that we didn't get to here, we can definitely do it in that scenario. Now let's get under the hood. Let's talk about Dylan Holloway here. Player I've talked about a little bit in recent weeks. Last 10 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 16.27 average time on ice. He's doing all of this from the bottom 6 there. Brandon Saad, Zach Bolduc was his line in this last game. Just tremendous stuff from Dylan Holloway, totally carrying that line. 14th in shots per 60, 8th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60 over the last 10 games, 118th in Corsi 4 per 60, 72nd in scoring chances 4 per 60, really being weighed down by that line for sure. And it's a spot where, is Jake Neighbors really better for the top power play than Dylan Holloway would be? I'm not convinced. Maybe they're unwilling to do that for other reasons, but this could be a spot where Dylan Holloway gets on the top power play, where he gets elevated, instead of Neighbors on the Buchnevich-Thomas line. Can that happen next? Or can he go play instead of Torpchenko with the Kairu Shen line? There's definitely ways in which Holloway continues to grow his ice time, continues to grow his role on this team, in which he doesn't even need to produce this much individual chance generation, and he can still return big numbers. And so that's what's got me excited about Holloway, is that the underlying numbers have just been insane over the last 10 games. It's a good size stretch at this point. Young player, could just be coming into his own. Is there a chance that, this is just a really hot stretch and things kind of peter out at some point? Absolutely. I'm not saying that, Dylan Holloway is that dude 100% rest of his career. He's going to go off. That's something that would be pretty irresponsible to make that call based on 10 games worth of data, but it's really, really encouraging. 90+% of NHL players never have a stretch like this in their career, right? So it's something that we have to take note of here with Dylan Holloway. So I want to shout out the man while he's doing this, and hopefully we can get some increased deployment for him, and he can sustain a high level of production even when the shots per 60 aren't quite as good as they are right now. Moving right along, we've got the move of the week. And Blake gave me a move of the week to talk about here. And he wanted to throw this out there, some self reflection here. One of the issues that he said with having so many teams as he does is that sometimes you don't put the necessary thought into some of the decisions he's making. In Kakuffel, he made a trade. He believes it was a mistake. Not a huge whiff, but a mistake. Offered it before he was going to bed, got accepted pretty quickly. Not a great sign, he says. Receives Stefan Nason, gives away Jared McCann. He said he doesn't think it's as crazy as it sounds. Just had Nason on that buy low show, as I mentioned. Believes in the player quite a bit. Underlying metrics and deployment are actually quite similar. Slight edge to Nason as of late. He's got PP1. Anyways, he says, I gave up too much to get him. High on McCann, not Seattle, and that was the thinking. But he says, moral of the story, don't make rash decisions unless you absolutely have to. Take the time, do your due diligence before sending trade offers out. I will live with this trade. Honestly think they could have similar numbers by the end of the season. Would take a career year for Nason and only an average year for McCann to make that happen. And that show ain't no good. He says, let's go Devils at the end. So yeah, I mean, my thoughts definitely. Personally, I'm taking McCann over Nason rest of season, but I can definitely see, we talked about Stefan Nason. The underlying numbers are terrific in the last little bit. Obviously, the Devils as a team, terrific. And, it's a good spot where you want to be getting players in those spots. So I can see it from that perspective. But yeah, I would take McCann. More established pedigree, has been getting a little bit more ice time as of late under Bilesma. And so I think it's a spot where I would take McCann, but yeah, I don't think it's like some major whiff, but definitely one where, you can think it's not a major whiff and also take away the moral of the story that Blake has given you here. Don't make these rash decisions. Take your time, do the due diligence, and think it through completely before sending out the trade, before making the ad drop decision. You don't have to make that ad drop decision in the 2 minutes that you're on the toilet. You can take some time and think about it in most cases. For myself, had a spot in Kakuffel where I had Mackenzie Blackwood. I picked him up for the week, thinking that he'd be on San Jose, gets traded to Colorado, get given a great gift, and then it turns out he's going to be out for the Tuesday, and that comes through on Monday. So he goes to my IR Plus on Monday, and I had already used 2 ads for the week in Kakuffel. To get myself set up for the week. But then I suddenly now had a free roster spot with Blackwood, and I wanted to use that because, I didn't know, obviously, if Blackwood, at that time, I didn't know if Blackwood was going to start Thursday, might not start till Saturday, which is what ended up happening. And so I wanted to, use that roster spot and get production from that roster spot for the week. So I used my third ad, but what I forgot to do is I had a waiver claim in for Dmitry Orlov, because he was going to fit in for all 3 of Carolina's games on the week, and I forgot to remove that waiver claim after making the third ad, and so I ended up picking up Orlov, and then I basically ended up using all 4 ads by Tuesday morning in Kakuffel, and that's never a spot that I want to be. It did not hurt me in Kakuffel. My team, stayed healthy for the rest of the week. It was a big deal, and I didn't end up, regretting it too much. But in a lot of scenarios, that can go south quickly. You can end up with extra players on IR and no moves to even counteract that at all, and you can really put yourself behind in those scenarios. And so if you are in a spot where you're making an unexpected move, or maybe whenever you are setting a waiver claim, if you're setting it in advance, then maybe just make sure you note that to yourself in which league you're doing that. If you're in multiple leagues, set an extra note to yourself and say, hey, if I'm going to make another move in this league, I do need to double check that I don't have a waiver claim. That could end up going through and end up using all my ads too early. And there are definitely scenarios in which that goes south in a big way, and you're suddenly hamstrung and you've cost yourself a week just by not using your ads correctly and not, giving yourself an out later on in the week. And I want to say, just through these moves of the week, I think you can see, but we're bringing to you not only our biggest W's, but also the L's that we're taking, the learning we're doing each and every season. We've done Move of the Week this is the 2nd season we've been doing this segment. I think you can see what we're trying to bring with this. I really do think that honest self-reflection and some humble self-analysis is kind of our greatest superpower at Apples and Ginos. For myself personally, I've always been a smart guy, got good grades. I have a master's degree. Like, I have the things that people conventionally would associate with someone being smart. But the more, the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that doesn't really mean a lot in a lot of scenarios, a lot of life scenarios, and also in fantasy. At some point, just being smart is not enough. You've got to look at what you're doing and have the humility to say, you know what, I really didn't do that in a good way. Whether in fantasy hockey, obviously we're applying it to things like this, where we make a trade that we regret pretty quickly, or, we don't do our due diligence and we end up using all 4 ads by Tuesday where we really shouldn't have done that. At some point you have to self-evaluate. You have to think to yourself, okay, what can I do differently to make sure that doesn't happen again? I think you see Blake modeling this as well. He's always looking for more info. He's talking about all 3 zones. He's talking about Mark Barber's 18 skater stream sheets. You see him talking to Kevin Woodley about goalies all the time. He's always out here looking for another edge, looking for what he doesn't know, right? I think knowing what you don't know is a really important thing in life, I guess, but also for fantasy hockey, for what we're doing here. And I really think that's something that we're able to apply to our own teams, and hopefully we're bringing to you with the segment, with everything that we're putting out in terms of content, that you're able to see this, that you're able to see that there is some sort of self-reflection and self-analysis that is a huge part of getting better at this game that we're all trying to play here. I'd say Apples and Ginos is built for the people out there who aren't happy with second place, who are willing to get humble, get critical with themselves about what's preventing them from taking their game to the next level. I'd say that's what we're here for. We're here for getting people dubs. We're here for getting people championships. You could find somebody who will, tell you what you want to hear. You could find somebody who will, run through the schedule for you. But I think what we're really trying to do here is to grind every edge that we can, because we're actually out here trying to get some championships. And I hope that's what you're taking away from this. I hope you're taking away that honest self-reflection. I hope you're taking away that humble self-analysis. I will get off my soapbox and we will move over to the head-to-head streamer deathmatch. And honestly, like, Blake gave me this big story about the bench press world record, but now I'm starting to second guess it, because this is like one of only 3 weeks on the season in which I absolutely crushed Blake in the head-to-head streamer deathmatch, and mysteriously he's missing here tonight. So if it doesn't show up on the news feeds tomorrow that Blake Creamer is the new world champion for the bench press, then I think we're gonna have to basically assume that he was too scared to talk to me after being absolutely crushed. Troy Terry 25.5 cupful points versus Blake's Dylan Cousins 8 points. Obviously joking there, but it's finally a good week for one of my picks. Troy Terry absolutely goes off, has himself a monster week. And that's good to get one in the W column. Blake's still up 7-3 on the season, so I can't talk too much. But hopefully my pick this week can also keep the streak going. Blake has gone with Quentin Byfield. I've gone with Casey Middlestat. This is a player that tormented me endlessly last year, so I'm hoping to somehow like reverse juju that for this year. I don't know if that's a thing or if that works on any level whatsoever, but Blake's Quentin Byfield versus my Casey Middlestat for this week, both 25% or under rostered this week. And I think we're getting to the end of this thing. If you've made it this far, you should definitely click the link in the description. Join the Discord community, 1,500 plus fantasy managers in there, talking about fantasy hockey all the time, talking about, grinding those edges. We're posting the latest Twitter news in there all the time. We're talking about what move we should make for this week. If Blackwood goes on the IR and he might not come back on Thursday, what do we do? Do we pick up this guy who gets us the 3 games played before Blackwood might come in? win for the Saturday game? Those are the kinds of questions we're constantly asking ourselves, trying to get better, trying to get each other better. So definitely join the Discord community. Like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you are able to do. We do greatly appreciate it. It really does help us out. But I think that's going to be all that I've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.